They sold her for $1, less than the price of a bottle of whiskey. The crowd laughed until one silent mountain man stepped forward and paid it. He thought he was buying a broken woman. Instead, he bought the most wanted woman in the territory and a fate that would hunt them both. Before we start this tale of tough times and saving, stop for a bit. Where are you hearing this story from, and what time is it? If you like it, please like and subscribe to get more stories like this one. They sold her for less than the cost of a bottle of whiskey. In the hard winter of 1874, in a rough mining camp named Broken Ridge, a lady was pulled onto a basic wooden stage. A dirty cloth bag was tied tight over her head, cutting her off from the world. The crowd laughed as if it were a show made just for them. Mud hit her dress. Someone threw a rock. Men shouted mean jokes, calling her broken things, useless, not worth feeding. But one man did not laugh. Elias Hawthorne stood at the edge of the crowd, tall and silent, his thick fur coat covered with snow. He had not spoken to another person in 6 months. He lived alone, high in the Bitterroot Mountains, far from people, far from noise, far from memories. He had come down only for supplies, salt, bullets, flour, nothing more. Then he saw her hands. They were shaking badly, not just from the cold, from fear, pure terror. That was something Elias knew well. The wind howled through Broken Ridge like a dying animal, carrying the smell of sweat, smoke, and dirty bodies. The camp was nothing but leaning shacks and sagging tents pressed against the mountains like they were afraid to fall away. Hope did not live in places like this. It came here to die. Elias fixed the pack on his shoulders and turned to walk away. Then the crack of a whip split the air. "Step right up, gentlemen," a smooth voice called out. "Don't be shy." The voice belonged to Dirk Callahan, a drifter with greasy hair and a bad name that spread like oil. He stood on an upside-down crate grinning at the crowd. Beside him stood the lady, her wrists tied, her body shaking under a thin gray dress that did nothing to stop the cold. "What you got there, Dirk?" a miner shouted. "A dog or a lady?" Laughter ripped through the crowd. "A little of both," Callahan said. "Found her walking near Deadwood. No name, no family. Won't say a word. Dumb as a fence post." "Why the sack?" another man yelled. Callahan sneered. "Trust me, you don't want to see what's under there. Face looks like it lost a fight with a wildcat. Ugly as sin, but strong hands. She'll work. Who starts the bidding at $5? Silence followed. $5 was too much for a lady Callahan said was ruined. Even lonely men had limits. "I wouldn't pay $2, someone laughed. The lady flinched, a small movement, but Elias caught it. Her shoulders tightened, her hands clenched. She was not just cold, she was being crushed. "All right," Callahan snapped, grabbing her arm and shaking her. $3? No one answered. Men began to drift away, bored. "Fine," Callahan spat. $1, $1 silver, or I leave her tied to a tree for the wolves. Something broke inside Elias. He was not a hero. He was a man who wanted peace and quiet and to be left alone. But he knew what it meant to be thrown away. He knew what it felt like to be treated as less than human. The lady stood still now, as if she had already accepted death. "I'll take her." The voice was deep, steady, and dangerous. The crowd turned as Elias stepped forward. He was massive, broad-shouldered, with a beard like iron and eyes hardened by loss. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his last silver dollar. It was all he had for the winter. The coin slapped onto a barrel. Callahan's grin returned fast. "Sold." He tossed the rope to Elias. "She's your problem now. Don't say I didn't warn you." Elias did not respond. He stepped closer to the lady, blocking the wind with his body. "Come on," he said quietly. "Let's get you out of this mud." The crowd mocked him as he led her away. He ignored them. The journey up the mountain was slow and hard. Snow began falling hard an hour after they left Broken Ridge. Elias walked ahead, leading his mule while the lady rode. He wrapped his spare blanket around her shoulders. She never spoke, never thanked him, just breathed fast inside the sack. 4 hours later, they reached his cabin, a strong log building built into the cliffside, surrounded by pine trees. Darkness had already fallen. Elias helped her down. Her legs buckled and he caught her. She was light, too light. Inside the cabin, the fire was dead and the air frozen. Elias set her in a chair by the hearth and lit the fire. Only then did he turn to her. The sack still covered her head. He pulled out his knife. She pulled back, shaking badly. "Easy," he said. "I'm not hurting you." He cut the rope at her neck and reached for the sack. "Look at me," he said gently. Slowly, she lifted her chin. Elias pulled the sack away. His breath left him. There were no scars, no bad looks. Her face was striking, almost not real, pale under the dirt. One eye was bruised and swollen, her lips split, but under the hurts was a beauty that stopped time. Her eyes were violet, sharp, smart. Afraid, she studied him closely. "He lied," she whispered. Her voice was soft, taut, nothing like what Elias expected. "Who are you?" Elias asked. She swallowed, then straightened her back. "My name is Clara Beaumont," she said, "and I have just killed the governor of Wyoming." The fire cracked loudly. Elias stared at her. He knew that name. Every area did, and the snow outside kept falling, sealing them together as fate closed its grip. The silence inside the cabin pressed down harder than the storm outside. The fire popped and shifted, throwing long shadows across the log walls. Elias Hawthorne did not move for several seconds. He simply stared at the lady sitting in his chair. The cloth sack lay at her feet like a dead thing. Clara Beaumont. The name carried weight. Wanted posters, rumors whispered in saloons. A lady accused of poisoning her husband and murdering the governor without mercy. A $5,000 bounty, dead or alive. Elias had just bought her for $1. "You're the most wanted lady in the area," Elias finally said. His voice was low. "Careful men hang for less than hiding you." "I know," Clara replied. Her violet eyes did not look away. "But I didn't kill him." Elias studied her face. He had seen liars beg and scream. She was not begging. She was furious. Outside, the wind hit the cabin like it wanted in. "You better start talking," Elias said, pulling a chair closer, "and don't leave out a single word." Clara's hands shook as the cold and fear finally caught up with her. Elias stood, spooned hot deer stew into a bowl, and set it in front of her along with bread. "Eat," he ordered. "You won't last long without it." She waited only a moment before eating like someone who had been hungry. The manners of a lady fought with the hunger of an animal. Elias watched closely. When the bowl was empty, she wiped her mouth and took a breath. "The governor was my godfather," she said. "He raised me after my parents died. His name was Theodore. He was not a good man. He was an honest one." Elias nodded once. "My husband," she continued, her voice getting tight, "Victor Beaumont, wanted his land. Coal lay under tribe land. The governor refused to sign the papers. He refused to break peace." She stood and walked the room, the blanket trailing behind her. "At a party, my husband poured the wine. He handed me the glass. I handed it to my uncle. He drank it. 2 minutes later, he was dead." Tears fell down her face. "They put the poison in my bag. They called me the Black Widow. I was the heir." The story wrote itself. "How did you escape?" Elias asked. "My maid hid me in a laundry cart. I walked for days. Callahan found me near Deadwood. When he saw the wanted posters, he put the sack on my head. He knew if he turned me in, men worse than him would come." "The Red Sash Gang," Elias said. Clara's face went pale. "Yes." Elias looked toward the window. Snow had buried half of it already. "They'll come," she whispered. "They always do." Elias stood and checked the rifle by the door. "I don't like bullies," he said, "and I don't like poisoners." That night he slept by the fire with his rifle across his knees. Clara slept in the small back room, safe for the first time in weeks. Morning came bright and blinding after the storm. The mountains stood clean and silent. For 2 days they settled into an uneasy way. Clara cleaned floors and fixed clothes. Elias taught her how to load a gun. He never touched her without reason, never looked at her like she was owned. She watched him when he thought she wasn't looking. the quiet strength, the sadness he carried like a scar. On the third morning, the sound of an axe stopped suddenly. Elias burst through the door, face hard. "Get in the cellar now." She obeyed without question. 10 minutes later, boots crunched outside. 3 men entered without knocking, lawmen in looks only, cold eyes. One wore a red sash at his waist. "We're looking for a lady," the leader said. "I live alone," Elias replied. They searched, they threatened. They smelled lavender and fresh bread. Elias stood his ground. At last they left. But Elias knew better. "They'll wait," he said after pulling Clara from the cellar. "We leave tonight." They left the mule and climbed into the high pass under moonlight. Snow swallowed their tracks. The cold was without mercy. By dawn they reached the top. Wind screamed like a living thing. Elias led them into an empty mining tunnel to rest. "Why are you doing this?" Clara asked softly. Elias stared at the stone wall. "I had a wife once," he said. "Men with money burned my house. The law laughed." He met her eyes. "I don't run anymore." They moved again, going down into a narrow canyon called the Throat. Ice lined the walls. A frozen creek ran under their feet. A rifle cracked. Bullets shattered stone. "They're on the ridge," Elias shouted. They ran. They dove behind boulders as shots echoed. Elias shot back, dropping one man. Then another appeared behind them. Elias threw his knife. The man screamed. A second shot rang out. Elias fell. "Elias!" Clara screamed. Blood spread fast across the snow. She grabbed the rifle and fired. The outlaw dropped. Elias gasped, fading. She dragged him toward a frozen waterfall, hiding behind the ice. She pressed cloth to the wound. "We have to burn it," Elias whispered. She did. Outside, Rock's voice echoed. Clara stepped out alone. She shattered the ice under him. Rock vanished into the freezing river. Silence returned. Clara crawled back, wrapped herself around Elias, and whispered until he breathed again. They were not safe yet, but they were alive. The mountains did not care who was innocent or guilty. They only cared who was strong enough to survive. Elias Hawthorne drifted in and out of darkness as Clara dragged him through the snow. His weight was crushing, but she refused to stop. She broke pine branches and tied them with strips torn from her dress, forming a rough sled. She laid him on it and pulled with everything she had left. Her boots split apart by the second day. She wrapped her feet in cloth. She set snares like Elias had shown her and caught rabbits. She melted snow and fed him broth, spoon by spoon, whispering his name whenever his breathing slowed. "Stay with me," she kept saying. "You didn't save me, so you could die now." On the fourth day, the mountains finally opened. Below them lay Silverton. Smoke rose from chimneys, bells rang, people moved through the streets like the world was still normal. Clara cried as she dragged the sled into town. Men stopped, women stared. A lady in rags pulling a giant man wrapped in blood-soaked hides was not something Silverton had seen before. She collapsed in front of the sheriff's office. The door flew open. A man rushed out, his face going white when he saw the body on the sled. "Elias," he breathed. Sheriff Luke Hawthorne dropped to his knees, checking for a pulse. "He's alive," Luke shouted. "Get the doctor now." He turned to the lady on the ground. "Who are you?" he asked gently. Clara lifted her head. Her face was raw and hollow, but her eyes burned. "My name is Clara Beaumont," she said, "and I have come to collect a debt." Elias lived. The bullet had missed his heart by inches. The burned wound saved him, though his recovery was slow and painful. Clara never left his side. 3 weeks later, the courthouse in Silverton overflowed. People came from miles away. They had heard the story. The mountain man, the runaway wife, the dollar that bought destiny. Victor Beaumont sat at the front, clean and confident, dressed like a man who had never feared results. Elias stood at the back, beside his brother, his arm in a sling, his posture straight despite the pain. "Call the defendant," the judge ordered. The doors opened. Clara entered wearing a simple blue dress. A black veil covered her face. She walked to the stand without shaking. "How do you plead?" the judge asked. "Not guilty," she said clearly. Victor's lawyer sneered, calling her unstable, upset, dangerous. Clara lifted the veil. Gasps filled the room. She told the truth. Elias stepped forward and placed Callahan's book on the bench. Payments, names, proof. The jury did not leave their seats. "Guilty," the foreman said. Victor screamed as he was dragged away. Outside, snow fell gently. "You're free," Elias said quietly. Clara looked at the town, the wealth waiting for her, the life she could reclaim. Then she looked at the mountains. She took out a battered silver dollar and pressed it into Elias's hand. "I want to buy something," she said softly. "What can you buy for $1?" he asked. "A partner," she replied. Elias closed his fingers around the coin. Sold. They rode back into the high country together, and the mountains kept their secret. As this story ends with hope and teamwork, one last idea. Where are you hearing this story from, and what time is it? If it touched you, please like and subscribe for more interesting tales.